Oh, good. So, welcome to Faith and Calm, class number 56. And tonight's theme is the idea that it's your second chances, never too late, and it's never too late. As it says in Yiddish, it's just nicht karin verfallen. It's never farful. It's never too late to fix things up, because whatever you were supposed to accomplish on Passover, for whatever reasons you weren't able to. So God gave us this holiday of Pesach Sheni, as a message to us that he never abandons us. And, we don't have to be perfect. And we always have the second chance in life. And today is a second chance in life, a second opportunity. So we should all take the advantage of it. So I'm going to start a little series, a story that becomes for the time of, for this period of time before Shavuos. And it's called the Story of Ruth, Megillus Ruth. And we're going to do it in a couple parts because it's a very interesting story. And it's all also very much about second chances, because Ruth was married and she had to marry again at an advanced age, and so did Boaz. He also remarried at an old age. So this is a love story. There are two love stories in the Bible, Jewish Bible. The one is done at Passover time. We read Shir HaShirim, which is about young love and about passion and excitement and all this other kinds of stuff. It's a very, very intense and passionate kind of story. And Ruth is a very different kind of story. It's a story of mature love for older people. There's a lot of silence. There's a lot of devotion. There's a lot of serious, introspection. It's a very different tone and different flavor. And we're going to see how that plays out in the story of Ruth. So you wanted me to say something?
No.
Okay. All right. So let's begin with when did the story happen? As you know, probably you might know, Ruth was the great-great-grandmother of great-grandmother of King David. So she is called the mother of royalty. And what was the story? So the story begins says that there was a Jewish man. His name was Elimelech. It doesn't say his name first, who lived in the town of Bethlehem in the time of the judges. He had a wife and two children. And there was a famine, and he left Israel and he went to live in Moab, in the neighboring country of Moab, non-Jewish country, in the time of the famine. Now let's give you a little bit of the inside story of what this is all talking about, because this is full of information. This Jewish man was well-to-do. He was rich. He was a Parnas. He was one of the leaders of the generation, and he was someone who was sought for advice and money and other kinds of stuff. And he lived in the time of the judges. It says he lived in the time where the judges were judged. The rabbis explain that this is the time period between the Jews coming to Israel in the 390 years until the first king of King Saul. The judges were the leaders of the people, but this was the time where the judges were being judged, meaning that nobody really had authority. And if anybody did, they were always criticized, questioning him. The Gemara puts it very, very cutely. They say, if a judge would tell somebody, you should remove the toothpick from under your fingers. And the person who he criticized would say, yeah, and you should remove the beam from your eye. Meaning basically, like if the government is telling you, you should be careful with not steal money. They say, yeah, but you're stealing money like mad from the government. And you're lying to us and other kinds of stuff. So, nobody had authority. Nobody, every Jew was criticizing the leaders, and the leaders couldn't lead. And it was a time of disorder in the Jewish people. There was no king. Elimelech, there was a famine because of this. As oftentimes when the Jews aren't behaving, and everybody was knocking at Elimelech's door, and Elimelech eventually said, I can't deal with it, all this stuff. And so he decided, for the sake of my family, I'm going to go somewhere else. I just can't handle everybody coming to me for money and for advice and for everything else, which was a big mistake, as you're going to see. And he left. He left when the Jews really needed him, because that's when you really need the leader to be there for you. And he left with his wife, Naomi, and his two sons, Machlon and Kilion. And they went to the neighboring country of Moab. The rabbis explain Moab, actually, it's not for nothing that he went to Moab. One of the reasons that Moab, it says that a Moabite shall not come into the congregation of Israel, which is going to become a very important point in the story. Moabites are not allowed to convert, it says. That's the literal reading of the Chumash. Why? It says the reason is given because they did not, when the Jews were leaving Egypt and they were entering the land of Israel, they came through the country of Moab and they wanted to pay for food and water, and Moab wouldn't sell to them. In fact, they hired a prophet, a false prophet named Bilam. Well, he was a prophet, but he was the evil prophet, and to curse the Jews. So that's how inhospitable they were. So they say Elimelech went there because that was the trade of the country, was, they kept their riches to themselves. And so he went there. He went there with his wife, Naomi, and tragedy struck. He died, and he left Naomi as a widow. The story continues, and it says that Elimelech died for Naomi. The rabbis explained, and they say a very, very poignant line in the Gemara. They say, "Ein ish meis ela leisha," that no man dies except for his wife. Meaning, when there's a loss in the family, children, after a while, they usually recover. They get by, they go on with the rest of their life. After 11 months of saying Kaddish, they go on. But with a widow or with a widower, because this is the same thing the other way, when a spouse dies, there's a gap, there's a hole that's never really filled, which is one of the reasons why they don't say Kaddish for more than 30 days, because you really can't ever fill up that gap. So you have to be very sensitive to a widow and a widower when they lose somebody, because there's a certain half of them that's always missing. There's always a part of them that's there. You have to be very sensitive when you talk to them. You have to be careful how you speak to them, because it never really heals. It seems that after he died, his two sons married local Moabite women. One of them was named Orpah and the other one was named Ruth. If he was still alive, the rabbis speculate, maybe he wouldn't have allowed this to happen, because it's not clear that they converted. In fact, the majority of the rabbis say they didn't convert. They married non-Jewish girls. And Elimelech probably wouldn't have allowed that to happen. After 10 years, they both died too. And now Naomi was really left alone. She left Israel with a husband, two sons, and now both her sons were dead, and her husband was dead. So Naomi picks herself up and says, this place has not been good for me. I'm going back to Israel. Besides, I heard that there's food. The famine is over and I can go back to my home country. So she picks herself up and starts going back. And her two daughter-in-laws want to go with her, Orpah and Ruth. And they're walking with her. And as they're walking, she starts to dissuade them. And we're going to learn from this that this is the law, that when somebody comes to try and convert, you're supposed to try and dissuade them. So she tells them, she says, listen, what do you want? What are you going? Why are you going here? You two girls, your sisters actually, Ruth and Orpah were sisters. They actually were descendants from the king of Moab, Eglon. So they were from royal dynasty. She says to them, listen, why would you leave your country? You are noble girls. This is a great place for you. You know the customs here. You go to Israel. It's not clear whether you're going to find a husband, if they'll let you marry and so forth. It's not clear. A Moabite could come into the Jerusalem. You'll be strangers the rest of your life. Stay here. It makes sense. Stay here. You'll find somebody. I want you, my daughters. She starts calling them my daughters. I want you to stay. I want you to have husbands. You're not going to have a husband there. They kiss her. They cry. But they're still going. So Naomi tries to convince them again, a second time. She says, listen, it's not making any sense. Even if I could get married today and I would have a child, are you going to wait 20 years until I have kids that grow up and you're going to marry them? It doesn't make any sense. Why are you coming along with me? And she tries again and again. 3 times she tries. From this we learn that converts have to be discouraged 3 times. before they are allowed to become Jews. You have to try and discourage them. Finally, Orpah picks herself up, kisses her mother-in-law, and goes back to her people. She leaves. And Ruth stays. And Naomi says, listen, your sister did the right thing. She went back. Why aren't you? And here Ruth says a very famous line and a very powerful line. And she says the following. She says to her mother-in-law, just to show how much she loved her, Orpah loved her too, because she kissed and she cried and so forth. But Ruth says, where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Where you die, that's where I will die, and there I will be buried. These lines we're going to dissect, and we're going to see something very amazing from this, because it's not just a nice poetic line. There's actually a dialogue going on. But first, let's look at Orpah. So what happened with Orpah? That night, the rabbis say a very, very tragic thing, a very shocking thing happened with Orpah. Orpah went back home, and she went and she had relations with 100 people. It's very, very shocking. Why? What was going on? So we have to understand. We'll understand Orpah a little bit from a story that comes much later in the Tanakh. But it's all connected. And that's the fascinating thing about the story with Ruth. It's all connected. Ruth, as I said, was the great-grandmother of King David. She gave birth to a person named Ovid, who gave birth to somebody named Yishai, who gave birth to David. Orpah also gave birth to children. She gave birth to 4 giants. One of them, the 4th one, was called Goliath. You may have heard of him. And David and Goliath come together in one of the most famous stories in all of Tanakh. Many years later.
But did Goliath, you say Orpah was Ruth's sister?
Orpah was Ruth's sister.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought they were.
So David and Goliath were first cousins. So it wasn't just it wasn't an accidental thing. It was a very, very interesting, very interesting relation going on there. Goliath was the hero of the Philistines. He was a giant. He was at least 20 feet tall. And he was massive and powerful. For the Jewish people, King Saul was in his army were completely stopped, and they couldn't win. And Goliath was coming out every morning and cursing the Jewish people. He would curse them every morning, and he would curse them every evening. And he would curse their God, and he would curse the Jewish people, and he demanded that they send a champion and fight with him, and they one-on-one, and that'll show who's more powerful. And King David was a young lad, and he happened to come to bring some food to his brothers. And he said to King Saul, "It's ridiculous. How can he curse out God here? I will go and fight him." King Saul wanted to give him armor, but he said, "No, I'm just taking my 5 little stones and my slingshot." And he went, and King David and Goliath said, "What am I, a dog? You send little boys to fight me?" And he laughed, and he cursed out God, and he cursed out David. And David didn't pay any attention. He took that 1 stone, put it in a slingshot, and he said, "You come with the power of yourself, and I come with the power of Hashem." He gave it a swing, hit him in the forehead, down he goes, chopped off his head, and the Philistines ran for it. They ran. The question the rabbis ask is, what was with Goliath? What was he so mad about the Jews? And why was he, for 40 days, why 40 days was he cursing out the Jewish people, and only in the morning and the evening? So they say, a very interesting insight, but it has to be understood. They say that the 40 days corresponds to the 40 steps that Orpah took. And the 4 children that Orpah had correspond to the 4 tears that she had. And the reason Goliath was cursing is he didn't want the Jews to say Shema. They have to say Shema in the morning and the evening, and he wanted to distract them. Why is this important? Why do we need to understand this? Why was that? What is Goliath? He's a non-Jew. What does he care about? Jewish customs and prayers and stuff like that. So this tells us something interesting about ourselves, and interesting about Orpah, and interesting about a lot of life. the rabbis say one other little line in Gemara Sota, which I'm learning right now. And they say about this battle between King David and Goliath, they say, let the one who kissed fall, the children of the one who kissed, fall into the hands of the one that cleaved. Because Orpah kissed Naomi and Ruth cleaved to Naomi. What's the difference between kissing and cleaving? Both the daughters saw something in Naomi. There was a attraction there. They saw something in the regalness, the royalty of Naomi, the Jewish customs, how things went. They saw it was not our current times, but they saw a Shabbos. They saw a Shabbos table. They heard Jewish learning. They saw Jewish respect for morality. They saw how this connection to a mission, and they were impressed by it. Orpah was impressed. She was affected by it. That's why she cried. That's why she felt something. She wasn't just neutral to her. She saw something delicious there that she wanted to be part of. The thing that was difficult for her was the restrictions in Judaism. She saw the positive, but the restrictions bothered her. Let's go back just a second to what was going on between Ruth and Naomi. Ruth didn't just make up the speech on the fly. Naomi was telling her the things that you're supposed to tell a convert before they convert. Naomi told Ruth, he says, listen, there are not only is it wonderful Judaism, but there are also restrictions in Judaism. For example, you can't walk 2,000 amos, 2,000 2,000
feet.
3,000 feet outside of a city on Shabbos. Even if you're not carrying, you can't walk out that far. Ruth says back to her, where you go, I will go. Where you walk, I will go. So it's going on. There's a conversation going on. You have to see both sides of the conversation. She says, it's not only that, and so forth. It's a woman is not allowed to be alone in a room, and a married woman is not allowed any woman, but even then it was any now then it was certainly a married woman not allowed to be alone, locked in a room. Judaism respects the boundaries.
Locked in a room with
a man, a closed room. You're not allowed. What's the problem? Yeah, but Judaism is very sensitive to the power of the male and the female energies. It wants to cultivate that, and it doesn't want that energy to be dispersed. And therefore, there's laws about intimacy. You have to be together with only people, your family or your husband or your children, whatever, but you're not allowed to be with a stranger. And so she says, so Naomi says, Ruth says back to her, says, where you lodge, I will lodge. So she's answering her. And then Naomi tells her, but you know what? There's 613 laws that are for the Jews, 365 negative commandments. It's not just like when you were a non-Jew, you can do what you want. There are many laws that many of them are restrictions. You can't do everything you want. She says, your people will be my people. And she says, yeah, but you can't worship idols. She says, your God will be my God. She says, but sometimes there's even in extreme cases, which once in 70 years, there's a death penalty. She says, where you die, I will die. And there I will be buried. I will be, and so we see that Ruth is able to accept the fact that it's not all just beautiful stuff. There's the positive mitzvahs in Judaism, but there's also, you have to protect energy, and you can't just let you do whatever you want to do. Orpah couldn't deal with that. Orpah's issue was she was a Moabite, and the Moabites had a very frivolous lifestyle. They believed, they had parties, they had fun, they went to sports stadiums, they had relations with whoever they want, whenever they want. It's okay. It feels good. It's the good thing to do. Do it however you want. Idols, yes, no, whatever turns you on, do it. She was not ready to accept the restrictions. She liked to, but she just felt that was not for her. So she left. But she didn't leave completely with no conscience. She felt a void. She felt something missing. And therefore, she had to fill herself up with something else. She had to kill that feeling in her, that warmth to Judaism. So that's why she had the relations with the 100 people. She had to drive it out, to make it, to dull it, to like drown herself in activities. These issues that sometimes happen in the parents and they don't get resolved come up flaring in the children. Goliath was not parv. He was not affected by Jews. Just as many of the greatest anti-Semites that we have in history, Hitler and I think Karl Marx and other ones, they had some Jewish blood inside of them. So when they saw Jews, they couldn't just ignore it. They had to get rid of them. They had to. Anti-Semitism is oftentimes it's this thing I have to get rid. I have to remove it. I have to get out of it. It bothers me. Goliath hated Jews because there was something in him that felt that there was something he was missing there, and he had to get rid of it to feel good about himself. So that's why he stood and he cursed. He cursed and he cursed and he cursed. There's a story that's interestingly told. It's told from one of the students of Moses Mendelssohn, the founder of the Enlightenment movement, who was an Orthodox Jew, but started the whole the thing, and all his children, interestingly enough, they married out. They didn't marry Jews, and they converted to Christianity and so forth. Anyway, he had a student who followed his ways and left Judaism entirely and didn't keep any Jewish practices. One time he came to a famous rabbi in Brod named Shlomo Kluger, and he told Rabbi Kluger, asked him, how are you doing? And he said, it's great. Since I left the yeshiva, I have money, I have fame, I have acceptance, everything is going great. So Rabbi Kluger says, everything is great. He says, no, there's one thing. There's a little piece of me, a Jewish conscience, that keeps bothering me whether I did the right thing or not. And I can't get rid of that. And it makes me crazy. How can I get rid of that voice in me? So Rabbi Kluger said, I know the problem. He says, you haven't had enough tuma, much impurity in your system. So he says, what should I do? He says, I'll tell you what, there's a Jewish custom that by the bed, when you wake up in the morning, there's a cup of water called Negelwasser. And you pour it on your hands when you get up to remove the impurity on your hands when you wake up that you got when you were sleeping. He says, you take that water and you drink it and you won't feel anything anymore about the Jewish conscience. So the guy goes, he pours the water out on his hands in the morning, and then he drinks the water, and it worked. He feels absolutely fine. He doesn't have any more Jewish conscience anymore. Realizing how powerful Jewish practices are, he therefore returns to Judaism. It's an interesting thing about us Jews. It's an interesting thing.
That's unusual.
I don't want to use up too much of my time. Do I have any more time to talk? A little bit more?
29.
Yep.
You have 1 more minute.
1 more minute? I have 1 more minute. All right, then I think it's going to have to be continued. I was going to continue a little bit with the story then, because this is where the story really begins, because Naomi and Ruth do come back to the land of Israel. They come back at the time of the barley harvest, which is the time of Passover. They walk on the road. It says that they walked on the road, meaning that there was nothing on the road but their feet. They were so poor that they didn't have shoes. They walked on the road all the way back to Israel in tattered clothing. And when they got to the land of Israel, everybody was standing there saying, whoa, they saw Naomi coming into the city. And they said, is this Naomi? This Naomi? I don't recognize her anymore. And Naomi, she was a regal person. And here she comes back as a beggar. And she says back to them, he says, don't call me Naomi anymore. Call me Mara. Call me bitter. Because I left, I had a full life, and now I have nothing. I'm poor. I'm really destitute. So anyway, so then so then we'll continue the story next week, and we'll explain the continuing story of the life of Naomi and Ruth now in the land of Israel, and we'll continue and we'll explain how she got involved with Boaz, and how the monarchy was established in the Jewish people. And I think that the message of the story will be that there's a bit of monarchy in all of us. And I'm hoping to bring that out in the rest of the story, is how everybody here is really regal. And you can go to the depths of despair and poorness and brokenness, as Ruth was and as Naomi was. They had nothing. They had no, she was a foreigner, and how they rose to the very top. And hopefully this will be a good lesson for everyone. So thank you, and to be continued. Okay.
Right. Good news tonight. Good
Good
news.
news. Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Oh, Hadassah gave you a thumbs up. Okay.
Yes, your
So-
koach.
Okay. Hello, everybody.
Hello, my dear.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming. Hi, Emily. Hi, Amy. Hi, Sari. Hi, Yael. Hi, Hadassah. Hi, Devorah. And whoever else is on the next page. Thank you so much for coming. And good. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say first? Oh, why is the lighting so different? Oh, I guess the sun went down. How interesting.
Yeah.
Hi, Sari. How are you?
To
Okay.
say about what Yechezkel Shimon talked about, or
Pardon? Yeah, you can ask about anything. You can say anything you like.
I have one question about it,
Okay.
which is that had Elimelech stayed in Israel, would
Mhm.
King David have still been born?
That's an excellent question. It's a wonderful question. And it's a wonderful question. You know, how can you answer such a thing, right? King David was meant to be born. King David was King David is like, they describe him as, there's a great book, Eliyahu Kitov. He wrote it 150 years ago. And he said that our sages said that King David is the strong pillar that holds up the Jewish people, and that he was so strong, he was such a powerhouse Jewishly, that Hashem wanted him at the midpoint of history, so that on one side he could hold up everything back to creation, and the other side he could hold up everything back to Mashiach. And when I read that, I told you, maybe I mentioned this before one time, when I read that, I thought, oh, how interesting. I like math. And so I went to look up, when is King David's, when did he live? And how does it relate? If that's the halfway point to Mashiach, how does it relate? And I looked it up, and I the year that he was king, from the beginning of time to the year he was king. And it's exactly the midpoint from our time right now. If you take our time right now and you divide it in half, if you take 5781 and you divide it in half, you come smack into the middle of his short reign as king. He was maybe from 30 to 70. He reigned not only in his lifetime, but smack in in the time that he was king. So anyway, if the Rebbe tells us that our time is the time of Mashiach, we even have the math to prove it. And I told my husband, my husband told this rabbi made it go viral. And anyway, so we definitely are at that time. But it's a great question. It's a hypothetical question. You can't answer a hypothetical question, but it's a great question. So anyway, anybody else have something they want to say? No? Okay, good. So I'll go swiftly through what I usually say, which is that we're living in an extraordinary time. We're living in the era of the unfolding of Mashiach. And the Rebbe said that we are in the time, we are approaching the time. It says in Isaiah 12:1, it says, in the time of Mashiach, in the time of, when we get to the ultimate form of everything, we are going to say, I think it says Vayomar Bayom Hahu, and it'll be said on that day, Ana Hashem. Oh no, it's either Ana Hashem or Odacha Hashem ki anafta bi. Thank you, Hashem, that you chastised me. What does that mean? The worst stuff in our life, the worst everything, the stuff that blew our brains, the stuff that you can't possibly understand, the stuff in the world that you can't possibly understand. We're going to point to that. And we're going to say, wow, thank you, Hashem. Thank you for all of that. thank you, Hashem, for that you chastised me in that way, because we're going to see what that was. And so, I hope that happens literally to all of us extremely soon. So, and I also like to say that our souls were handpicked to be in this time, and we were given the tools that we need: the Torah, the mitzvos, the leaders, and that tonight we're advancing that goal because the Rebbe, who hinted broadly, not one time, not 10 times, many, many times, that he is Mashiach, and he even said that the grave will have no effect on him. And anyway, so he said it's happening now. So I also like to review for a minute what we did last time. And just a second.
Amen.
So we talked a little bit last time about Mashiach's ancestors, who he descends from, who Hashem picked to be worthy of having Mashiach in their line. And, Mashiach is not just another king. We're taught that, it says in the beginning, probably many of you are familiar with the expression in Bereshis. It says, V'ruach Elokim merachefes al pnei ha'adamah. And the spirit of, in the very beginning of creation, it says the spirit of Hashem hovered over the waters. And what did the sages say that was? That was the neshama. That was the spirit of Mashiach. He was there from the beginning of time, because it's not a reward that is, an incidental reward that comes at the end of the time. It's the whole purpose of the whole world. The time of Mashiach is the whole purpose of the whole world. It's not a reward. It's the goal, and it was always there. So anyway, so who did Hashem pick to be his ancestors among the other illustrious people? We talked about Miriam and Nachshon ben Aminadav. Miriam, the sister of Moshe, and we mentioned that what is the similarity of these two people? The similarity of these two people is they both lived in times where you could not see where things were going. You could not, it was not obvious. The good in the time was not obvious at all. And one fact that I left out last time when I was talking about Miriam convinced her father to continue having babies with her mother. And through him, all the Jewish men continued having babies with their wives, because she said, we have to rely on the prophecy. Abraham told us that, Hashem told Abraham that that things were going to be hard. We were going to be slaves in a land that was not ours, but that we would come out, a great Redeemer would come redeem us. And so we have to believe in it. We have to believe in our future. This is a prophecy. And you have to believe a proven prophet. It says in Torah, you have to believe them. And anyway, and also she herself had prophecy. It's she was 5 years old. It says in the time of Mashiach, prophecy will return, and it will also return to children. So anyway, at 5, she told her parents that mommy, if you get back together with mommy is going to have the Redeemer. And so they did. Her father listened to her. Her father was the leader of the generation. He listened to her. And, Moshe was born 7 months later. And after they got back together again, after they remarried. And then when he was 3 months old, they couldn't hide. He was actually born, at the beginning of the 7th month. 3 months later, they couldn't hide him anymore. And as you know, they put him in on the bank of the Nile. And before that happened, her father apparently slapped her lightly. And he said, Biti, my daughter, what happened to your prophecy? Look, we have to put this baby near the Nile, and we have to rely on Hashem to take care of him. What happened to your prophecy? And so then we mentioned that it says, I forgot the word, save, and Miriam stood. And it's a very strong word for stood. And our sages say, what does it mean? It meant that she stood by the prophecy. We got this as a prophecy. I got a prophecy, and I don't care what it looks like. I don't care. A Jew lives by what the prophet said. So she did that, And we all know Moshe was saved and went on to save the Jewish people. And then after they got out of Egypt, we know that they got to the Red Sea and it was raging. And another person, Nachshon ben Aminadav from the tribe of Yehuda, Hashem told Moshe, tell the people to go forward. That's what I told them. What's the problem? Go forward. But nobody could figure out how to go forward when the sea was raging. How can you go forward? And Nachshon ben Aminadav said, the prophet said, go forward. I don't care that there's no way. I'm going forward. And then the whole Jewish people took courage and they followed him. So Mashiach comes from such a person, Mashiach from such people, from people who look at the craziness around them and they say, you know what? It's true. Things don't look normal, but it doesn't matter. What did the prophet say? What's really happening? You want to know what's really happening? Listen to what the prophet said. And the Rebbe, who has proven himself as a prophet, he far exceeds the Torah requirements for prophecy. He told us that Geula is unfolding. The revelation is unfolding. So anyway, tonight also happens to be a very special, Yaskel Shimon just briefly mentioned it. Today was Pesach Sheni, the second Passover. And it came about as a reward for a few Jews who, when the Jews were in the desert, the very first anniversary of the leaving of Egypt, they wanted to do the mitzvah of bringing the Paschal sacrifice, the Pesach sacrifice, but they couldn't do it because they were carrying the bones of Yosef. So you can't do, they had a certain, there are technical reasons why they couldn't do it, but they complained to Moshe and they said, hey, how come we're losing out? We're doing one mitzvah, we have to lose out from another. And Moshe said, good question, I'll ask Hashem. He asked Hashem and Hashem said, whoa, I love people like that. People who, they're hungry for a mitzvah. They understand the value of a mitzvah. I'm going to make a special holiday for them called Pesach Sheni. And Pesach Sheni means that whatever you think has fallen away in life, think again, think again, think again. You're dealing with the master of the universe. And there is nothing that is, there's nothing that is outside of his purview. So it also happens to be, Pesach Sheni also happens to be my father's birthday. Had my father still been alive, my father would be 99 years old right now. And he'd be 99. He's a Holocaust survivor. He married a little later. And my father, I think it's on session 17. I have to check, but I think it's session 17. If you didn't hear my father's Holocaust story, run to session 17, and it's probably towards the end because I speak, Haskell Shimon speaks the first half and I speak the second half, but it's such a blockbuster story. It's just something that is not to be missed. I'm not going to tell it again tonight, but I'm going to say that my father had many second chances in life. He survived the Holocaust. That's a major second chance. And then I've spoken about my father before, and I've said this before, that my father was the quietest man who ever lived. And I mentioned how we would be together and he would take, like in a car or something, he would take a deep breath and I'd say to myself, yeah, he's going to say something. And then he would relax and not say anything. Anyway, later in life, my mother, late in their life, my mother developed a type of dementia. And my mother was always, and even with the dementia, was a delicious human being, but she wasn't functional anymore. She wasn't highly functional, that is. And so my father took over as the social fulcrum of the family, and he became talkative. People came to visit. They loved talking to my father. They said, oh, he's so gracious. It's so much fun talking to him. It's so interesting. He developed into an entirely different human being. I mean, whatever was in there came out. We could hear it. It was, anyway, so, yeah. And I'm gonna move on from there. Today, this Thursday night until Friday night is Lag BaOmer. It is one of the most spectacular days on the Jewish calendar, and it's not to be treated lightly, and it's not to be missed. And it's the day of two rabbis, Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest rabbis who ever lived, and his story perhaps we'll tell another time, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Now, for some reason, even though Rabbi Akiva was literally one of the greatest rabbis who ever lived, and everything that we have today is because of Rabbi Akiva, because there was a bottleneck in Jewish history where the rabbis were like decimated, and it went down to pretty much Rabbi Akiva, and then the rest of it came out of Rabbi Akiva. He was like a bottleneck. And but even despite that, when it comes to their day of Lag BaOmer, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai steals the limelight. It is his day. And it happens to be his yahrzeit. And he is the author, for those who don't know, he's the author of the Zohar, which is the preeminent work of Jewish mysticism. And on the day of his yahrzeit, he gave over to his students a tremendous amount of the secrets of the Torah, secrets that had been around from the beginning of time, but they were only allowed to be told from like one person in a generation who would pass them on to another person in the generation. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, no, I can teach all of you. And it was written down by one of his pupils into the book called, in the book called the Zohar. And out of the ordinary, simply extraordinary things are said about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, not like any other rabbi. His colleagues, one of his colleagues said, you want to see the face of Hashem? Look at the face of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Now, before you think, oh, the rabbis, they're just like, that's who they are. No, the rabbis are not like that. The rabbis of the Gemara are sharp, and they can give somebody a zetz, and they're not like that. But for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, everything changes. And anyway, so one of the secrets of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is that why is he so appealing? He always looked at the soul of the matter. So even in simple things like halacha, Jewish law is not simple, but in things like halacha, Jewish life, you know what halacha means, by the way? Anybody know what the translation of that word is? Law is such a poor translation. It's the translation that we use. But does anybody know what halacha means? Yael, tell us what halacha means. I'll tell you.
Halacha is from the word lalechet, to go.
Yes, it's the way to go. Halacha is the path. Halacha, the way to go. It's like Jewish law is not something that is arbitrarily imposed on us. If you want to live life, this is the way to go. And I have to, it's not scientific, but I have to tell you that there's nothing more freeing than Jewish law. There is nothing more strengthening and enabling than Jewish law. Everybody who looks at Jewish law from the outside says, me? No. I said, me? No. But then when what is that expression? I went beyond the I don't know what the expression is, the critical level of what is it? It's whenever when the burden of truth was it was obvious that Judaism was true, and I bit the bullet, and I became and I observed halacha. I took on everything. I became a different person. The strength that I have from that is not to be believed. It's an incredibly enabling thing for each and every one of us. But anyway, even in a matter like Jewish law, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai always looked at the soul of the matter. So he was very, very, like all observant Jews, he was very careful with Jewish law. But he had he was among the rabbis who were, who clarified many things about Jewish law. And so, for example, in something like Shabbos law, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai held that if you didn't intend to do the thing that was forbidden by law, then nothing happened. You didn't violate law. So, for example, the classic example is given: you're not allowed to plow on Shabbos. And so he said, so there's a difference of opinion. If you drag a heavy bench across your lawn to bring it to your neighbor's house so that you can sit there, you can have a party with them, are you violating the law that you're not allowed to plow on Shabbos? And so some sages said, like, I think it's Rabbi, oh God, I can't remember. Yehuda, I think it's Rabbi Yehuda, said, yeah, the act is done. Look at those furrows. You made furrows. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, no, it's, your plan, your goal was to get the bench to your neighbor. Your goal is not to plow. Nothing was done. So it's not very simple, and you have to look into it. For example, if you absolutely know that what you're going to do is going to produce a bad action, then you're not allowed to do it. But the law follows Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That, so for example, if you want to throw something in your garbage pail and slap the lid on it, are you allowed to do it? It's a garbage pail. There could be flies in there. If you put the lid on, you're trapping. You're not allowed to trap on Shabbos. But the halacha goes with Rabbi Shimon. I'm sorry, your purpose is not trapping, and you don't even know if there's a fly in there or not. You're allowed to do it. So the law is called Eina Miskavin. If you don't intend, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai promulgated it, and it was accepted by the rabbis. If you don't intend to do the law, it just happens to happen. It might not happen, it might happen, but it wasn't your intention, and if it ends up happening, it's not a sin. It's not, you didn't do anything wrong. So anyway, so I'm going to skip straight to a cute little story that I heard from Rabbi Yossi Jacobson. And I heard it a few years ago, so I don't remember the details exactly. But he was saying that, anybody have any idea how many people come to celebrate? Oh, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, my yahrzeit has to be celebrated, not mourned. You have to celebrate, because I finished my job in this world. My job was to reveal the secrets of the Torah, and I did it. And so I want everybody to celebrate. Nobody's allowed to mourn. And anybody have any idea how many people go to his graveside in Meron in northern Israel every year on Lag BaOmer? Anybody have any idea? More than 600,000. More than 600,000. And I want to tell you, these are not, the Orthodox Jews are far outnumbered by Jews of every stripe, color, association, completely against. There are those who are completely against Torah. There are those who don't, they wouldn't voluntarily keep a mitzvah, and they all go. They're all drawn there. It's just the most amazing thing. So apparently somebody was on a plane with another rabbi, a rabbi who had, either they were on their way to Meron or they were leaving from Meron. And the person asked the rabbi, tell me, Rabbi, do you have any idea? Nowhere in the world do 600,000 Jews get together except yearly at Meron. Like that's what they do. And he said, why? There were rabbis that were as illustrious, if not more illustrious, than the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and nobody goes to them for their yahrzeit, or not a big, not a huge crowd like that. And the rabbi said, he said a very interesting thing. He said, a rabbi like Shimon Bar Yochai, who holds, that means he maintains that a person who didn't intend a sin, didn't sin, such a person, everybody goes to. You know why? Because the rabbi said, what Jew intends to do anything wrong? What Jew intends a sin? They don't intend, when a Jew does something wrong, it's not that they intend to sin. It's just, it's that they wanted to eat that thing, or it's not that they wanted to go against Hashem. They wanted to eat that thing. They wanted to ski on Shabbos. They had a taiva. They had a yearning. And so a rabbi who says, now it doesn't go as far as what this guy said, but a rabbi who sees that who gets Jews, that they don't intend to go against Hashem. It's just that they have desires, they have taivas, that's the word for desire in Hebrew. So so a rabbi like that, everybody loves him because he gets us. He gets who we are. And I want to say that, you know, Yeheskel Shimon and I went to Meron. We went to Meron in 2000. When was it? We went to Meron 2003. And 2003. And I had to, I thought I was flying off when I was on the mountain. It's on the top of a mountain. When I was on the mountain, I thought I was flying off into the universe. And I said, oh, I need something to ground me. This is too much. And I caught sight of somebody who looked like a Posner. I said, are you a Posner? He was Rabbi Posner's kid. And he was handing out literature. And I said, give me some of that literature. I need it. And so I took the literature and I started handing it out to people. Would you like this? Would you like a flyer explaining about Lag BaOmer? And thank God it brought my feet back down to the earth. And I have to say that what I davened for on that Lag BaOmer, I really got. I really, really got. It didn't even occur to me until this evening when I was thinking about it. What I davened for the most sincerely, I got. And I got it.
Was it an intense spiritual feeling that you were having?
Yeah. And
Is
also,
that what it was?
And also, I, you know, like, yeah, there's two pulls in a Jew. There's something called Ratzo and there's something called Shov. A Jew, when they, you know, when they're bitten by something spiritual, they're set on fire by something spiritual, their soul wants to leave their body. They want to go back to Hashem. But there's another force called Shov, and that is Hashem doesn't want that. He wants you to go back down and do mitzvahs and do Torah, because that's the reason you were born. So I needed to do something. I needed to ground myself. So so anyway, I wanted to end by saying that, you know, there's so many similarities between Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and the Rebbe made Lag BaOmer huge in America, and parades, kids parades, enormous stuff. And I'm not going to do it now, but you'll remind me, one of you will remind me if I told you about Lag BaOmer in Crown Heights, which for me was even more spectacular than Lag BaOmer in Meron. And anyway, the reason the Rebbe reminds me so much of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is that the Rebbe gets people. He just really gets them. And he cares about everybody, and not just Jews, even non-Jews. You know, Yeheskel Shimon told a story once about Shirley Chisholm, how when she was new to the, I don't know if it was the House of Representatives or the Senate, probably the House of Representatives. House of Representatives. When she was new to the House of Representatives, she paid a call to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and she was very disappointed. If you remember the story, she was extremely disappointed because they shuttled her into a low profile position in the House of Representatives. They put her on the she was like an urban Black woman, and they put her in the agriculture committee, and she thought this is a death sentence. They're trying to get rid of me. And the Rebbe told her, you know, there are so many people in America who are hungry, and there's so much surplus of food in America that gets thrown out. He said, if something could be done to shuttle that surplus food to poor people, that would be a tremendous accomplishment. And with that, food stamps were started. So, and her career was launched. And there's another story. There was a representative from New York. He covered his area covered various areas, including various areas in New York City. And he came to visit the Rebbe. You know, a lot of politicians came to the Rebbe. And this guy talked to the Rebbe about all these different things and was very interested in what the Rebbe said. And then at the end, the Rebbe said, now can I ask you something? And the guy was thinking, here it comes. Everybody's the same. Even this big guy's the same. Now he's going to ask me some special favor for the Jewish people. I know it. Here it comes. And what did the Rebbe say? The Rebbe said, you know, there's a group of people in New York, in your district, and they are extremely hardworking, but they're very, very quiet, and their needs are often neglected. They're the people in Chinatown, the Chinese people. Can you help them? Because they're wonderful. They're really, really hardworking, but they're very, very quiet and modest and unassuming. And they need somebody to look after them. And if you would look after them, I would appreciate it greatly. So anyway, next week I want to tell a story that I really like about the Rebbe rescuing individual lost souls. And I'm going to end very quickly with two very quick stories. And one of them, and they're similar. One is about Shimon Bar Yochai, and the other one is about the Rebbe. Maybe you know the story. It's a very, very famous story. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, there's a thing in Jewish law that it's a big thing to have kids. And there was a couple in Israel, and they were married for many years, and they had no kids. And they came to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and they said, we think we should get a divorce because we're having no kids. We love each other. We're having no kids, but we think that's the way to go. And so Rabbi Shimon, what happened? I lost you. Oh, there you are. And so Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai they said, what should we do? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, you know what? This is what I think you should do. Just like you celebrated your wedding with a big feast and a big celebration, I think you should go home and make a big celebration to celebrate the dissolution of your marriage. If that's what you want to dissolve your marriage, celebrate it before you get your divorce. Have a big celebration. The next day you can get your divorce, whatever. And so that's exactly what they did. They had a huge feast. They brought out everything that they had, and they drank and they ate and they celebrated. Maybe they had friends there too, and they had this huge, huge celebration. And the man got drunk, and he said to his wife, "My precious, precious wife, you're going to go back to your father's house." He said, "I want to let you know that whatever is the most precious to you of what we have, I want you to take it. Whatever is the most precious to you, take it before when you go back to your father's house." So with that, he conked out. He was very drunk. He conked out. And she quickly motioned to her servants. She said, "Put him on the couch, carry this couch or bed mattress over to my father's house and bring him up to my bedroom." And so, and sometime later, he woke up and he said, "Where am I?" And she said, "You're in my father's house." He said, "What am I doing here?" She said, "Don't you remember? You told me to take whatever is most precious in the house, to take it to my father's house. There's nothing in our house that's more precious to me than you." And with that, they both ran back to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He gave them a blessing, and they had children. And I guess Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had, he wanted to reawaken their sense of how precious they were to each other. And with that sense of love, they give birth to a kid. So there's another famous story about our Rebbe. And it begins with the couple might have been from Israel also. I'm not sure if they're from Israel. They're not from America. And they were married for many years. And there is actually a law in Judaism that if you live in Israel and you're married for 10 years and you have no children, you should get divorced and try again with somebody else. And because Jewish children are such a big thing. So what do people do nowadays? If they live in Israel, a lot of people leave Israel towards the 10th year because they don't want to separate. And that's a perfectly kosher thing to do. So this couple didn't know what to do. And he and the problem, and he's a Kohen. The man was a Kohen, and a Kohen, if a Kohen divorces somebody, a Kohen can't marry a divorced woman. Even the woman he divorced, he can't marry a divorced woman. It's one of the laws of a Kohen. And so they didn't know what to do. They were agonizing. And they finally decided, we're going to do it. We're going to get a divorce. We're going to do it. They got a divorce. And after they got a divorce, they loved each other, but they wanted to have family. And after they got a divorce, the woman discovered that she was expecting. And it was like such a phenomenal tragedy. Here I'm expecting, and you can't remarry me. You can't remarry me. He went to rabbis all over the globe to try and find a loophole so that he could remarry his wife and have their child together. And nobody was able to help him. Finally, somebody suggested that he go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe in New York. He went to the Lubavitcher Rebbe in New York, and he told him the whole story. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe looked at him and he said, "Go home and talk to your mother." You know what that meant. And he said, okay. He went home and he said, the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, "I have to talk to you, Mommy. What can you do to help me?" So he said, to go talk to you. And she said, "I never wanted to tell you this. This story took place a long time ago." And she said, "I never wanted to tell you this, but you are adopted." There was a time in history, not so long ago, where people did not tell children that they were adopted. They didn't want them to feel different. And so she said, "I didn't want to tell you this, but your father and I adopted you. You are not a Kohen." And he said, "Wow!" And he got remarried to his wife. So anyway, with that, I just want to end by saying that candlelighting is 7:25 this Shabbos at the end of Lag BaOmer. And in a few minutes, I'm going to get off the line first. It's going to be dark, after dark. Dark is after 8:00. It's like 8:09. You can count the Omer. And yesterday, you can count one more than yesterday. Yesterday was 29. So it's 29 plus, I can't say it because you're not allowed to say it. So unless you're counting. So anyway, I love you all, and I thank you all so much.
I have a question.
Oh, please, yes.
You sort of just alluded to it a moment ago, and I guess I can count with the Omer. When is Lag BaOmer? When is that?
Lag BaOmer is Thursday night, and it ends on Friday. It ends Friday night. It's from Thursday after sunset to Friday sunset.
And what should we do other than